There's a day to be born and a day to die.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Movie Review. This time we are looking at Mesa of Lost Women. This is a 1953 film, runs about an hour and 10 minutes. It was directed by Ormond and Herbert Tevos. Now the movie does open with Lyle Talbot doing an opening narration. For those of you that don't know, Lyle Talbot is a well-known B-movie actor and bit part player, but he is probably best known as General Roberts in Plan 9 from Outer Space. So we get this long opening narration as two people wander around the desert. It's a shockingly long amount of time with some recycled footage of them walking. So you actually see the same clip in less than 30 seconds. At one point, you'll notice in this opening that the man is wearing a hat from the distance shots, but when they do a close-up, his hat is gone, and then it's back on in the next scene. So I guess he dropped his hat somewhere? I don't know. And they get picked up by an American surveyor. If you watch the surveyor get in his car, his partner has like a fedora on, but when you see a close-up of it, it's a rather rotund guy wearing a sombrero. They're taken to a field hospital, and I use those words very lightly because it's just a room with a couple of beds and a desk. There's no IV drips, no medical anything in there, just a couple of beds. That is the scariest field hospital I've ever seen. It looks suspiciously like a broom closet, but this movie is an ultra low budget film. Now we learn that the man is a pilot named Grant Phillips, who was the pilot of a plane that has been reported lost. Apparently the plane was way off course through mysterious reasons that we could figure out later on that there were some shenanigans at play by a traitor, but we'll get to that in a minute. The plane had engine trouble and was forced to land. Now they say near the Zarpa Mesa, which is partly correct because they were forced to land due to some engine trouble, but then they were forced to take off again and then they landed again. So it's a whole ordeal. But we'll get back to that too. Now this is around the time the narrator tells us that Pepe had been hearing stories for a while about the Mesa and some shenanigans going on up there. Very vaguely put. And then we're told that we're looking at a flashback, but the flashback doesn't make a lot of sense because it says we are flashing back a year ago and there's a man who was taken to this so-called inaccessible Mesa that apparently the guy could just kind of stroll up with a mild amount of effort. Now this man is Dr. Masterson and he is a generic scientist doctor guy. They don't really explain a whole lot, but he's apparently lured to this location to meet with Dr. Aranya, who is doing experiments at this Mesa to create a human spider hybrid. He's been using tarantulas mostly apparently. And we get a lot of exposition in here. It's sort of a info dump about what the doctor is doing. Now, Dr. Masterson wants no part of this monstrous mad science experiments, but then bad things are about to happen. Now, supposedly there's a time jump here because the plane was a recent thing and Dr. Masterson's visit was a year ago. Now, we know that Dr. Masterson was put in a sanitarium, but there's never any indication that he was there for a long time. In fact, it seems like he wasn't there very long at all. So he manages to somehow escape from this mental institution and is just out and about on the town, and he goes to a club and he meets the people from the airplane, which are Doreen Culberston, Grant Phillips, and Doreen's fiance. Now another man shows up named George, who is a nurse at the sanitarium, and he is supposed to be trying to locate the escaped Dr. Masterson. Well, things go horribly wrong because the doctor has a gun and an insane smile on his face, and he occasionally drops pseudo-biblical quotes for no apparent reason. Well, he takes everybody hostage after shooting a dancer, and he shoots the dancer not because she's terrible at dancing, or the fact that the band kinda isn't very good, but because he felt like it, I guess. So he takes these people hostage and goes out to the plane, and that's where Grant gets kidnapped, and there's a random Chinese-looking guy there named Wu, and then they're forced to fly to the Mesa, Mesa, and then things go downhill from there. There's a lot of vegetation on this mesa, and it's not like tumbleweeds and desert-looking plants. There's just a bunch of trees there for some reason, so I don't know what's going on there, but there's an inordinate amount of foliage on top of this mesa. There are several problems with this film, one of which is the night shots are incredibly dark, so you really can't see what's going on. The flashlight doesn't really do much to alleviate that, so the day for night shots would have probably benefited this movie, but we don't get any of that. We get actual darkness. Now, there is a traitor within the party, which is how they got put off course, apparently, and we find out who that is, but, they don't make it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. It's sort of a throwaway sequence. Dr. Aranya is barely in this film. Now, he's played by the legendary actor Jackie Coogan, probably best known to most audiences as Uncle Fester from the Addams Family TV series, but he was a silent film star as a kid too, and he has a litany of acting roles. He is barely recognizable in this part, and that's probably a good thing because, yikes, he was the only standout performance in this film. Robert Knapp did a pretty good job, but he looked kind of bored. Even Crispin Martin, who played Pepe, really looked like he didn't want to be there. So this was just a very, very weird, boring movie. It was the worst thing it could be, which was boring. There's two people falling in love for no apparent reason, just kind of suddenly. Although the science-y technology stuff that they had in the background looked really cool. And there's, of course, beakers with smoke coming out of them. That looked really cool. But you don't really see the laboratory very much in here. There's a giant tarantula that really doesn't do much of anything. There's a lot of weird jump cuts, and a lot of times they superimpose faces over sequences. There's just these weird profile shots that make no sense. They're not transitions, they're just superimposed faces that you see kind of randomly throughout the film, and it makes no sense whatsoever. So of course none of this stuff could really add anything to the film. It's really, really dull to begin with. The main problem I had with the movie is the soundtrack. You get these flamenco guitars and piano music and occasionally a little bit of drums that are on a loop through the entire film. Except in the one dance sequence where you have different annoying music. It becomes borderline a Geneva Convention violation to have to listen to this music over and over again. Although if you hear the music and you think it sounds familiar, you probably saw Ed Wood's Jailbait, because Ed Wood recycled this music for that film. Now, I haven't seen that movie in a long time, but I don't remember it being this painful to watch. This movie felt a lot longer than an hour and 10 minutes because it just drags on and on and on. And when they're not doing an annoying voiceover narration that doesn't really add much, or it's a massive info dump, you get this painfully loud music constantly in your ear. And sometimes it even obscures a little bit of the dialogue. So I don't know what they were thinking there, but the music should have been a lot quieter and a lot more infrequent. So there's not much good I can say about this film. It's not even really particularly fun to make fun of. We don't get much of the mad scientist, and the main characters are barely in a scene with him. It's one scene, very briefly, where all of the protagonists and the antagonists are together. And it was really disappointing to see that. I was hoping for some mad science exposition, but we don't really even get that. The fact that Dr. Aranya is probably only in this movie for about 5 minutes is disappointing because he was the most interesting character in the film. Now, I did find it a little interesting that Muerto State Hospital is a thing, because I don't want to go to Death State Hospital. That doesn't seem like they would have a good track record of keeping you alive. But I guess nobody really thought of that when they were making this movie. Now, I counted around 8 deaths, and there's probably a few more that I could have counted, but I was just kind of ballparking that because of the final fight scene where there's an explosion and you think most of the people in the room are dead. Otherwise, the number would have been significantly lower. And there aren't any deaths for the first 45 to 50 minutes of the film. It really looked like they were trying to wrap the movie up and didn't know how to end it. edit. So everything got kind of slapped together and rushed. They were probably going to add other scenes in, but they just never made the cut. So this has to be just bad cheese. This isn't even good cheese. It's not fun cheese. It's just a thing that you sit through to get to the second movie at the drive-in or the double bill, because I don't know why anybody would watch this movie. There's no way this one did very well at the box office. I have no doubt the critics tore this apart, but it is a very surreal, boring movie. Now, maybe if you're on a lot of drugs and are looking at the creepy profile shots that they show you several times, it would make more sense, but I doubt it. There's a lot of wasted potential with a really cool premise of these like spider women hybrids and the dwarves that are supposed to be the male version of them that are less powerful and don't really do anything. So they kind of wasted the presence of the primary creatures. The giant tarantula is never explained. It barely does anything, like I said. And it really doesn't even add anything to the movie because it's only in 2 scenes. And then you have this like kind of weird intro thing that's kind of setting up that these spider women are really dangerous, but they don't really do anything. So there's no real action in here. It's just sort of this weird story that goes from one scene to the next, and it does have a coherent story. It's just a really terrible one that is lying to you about this potential for these exciting things with these spider women and spider dwarf guys that never accomplish anything. This mysterious doctor that's barely in the movie and doesn't really do anything. There's a brief exposition dump where he's in the movie, but that's about it. I think Jackie Coogan just did this to cash a check. He was probably on set for 2 days and that was it. And I don't blame him for that. This was just all around bad direction, terrible scripting, and some really flawed sequences. This movie could have been interesting. It could have been a fun B movie, but it failed at every step. The pacing's bad. The dialogue is really rigid. The acting's okay. It's pretty standard B movie fare for the 50s. And Jackie Coogan did a pretty standout performance, but there was just too much extraneous talking and narration. The voiceovers really hurt the movie. This is all stuff that should have been explained in the story, but instead you get a couple of exposition dumps, and the rest of the movie is just meandering sequences that really are built up without payoff. So I'm not going to recommend this one. This is a real big miss on pretty much every front, and I think you'd be hard pressed to actually find any real entertainment value out of this. It's just a weird, boring movie that missed every opportunity it had to be something fun. So this one would be ripe for a remake where you could make it more exciting and actually make use of the giant tarantula and the spider women. But this one probably just didn't have the budget to pull that off. And it's a meandering mess that the lobby cards actually are way better and more interesting than the actual film. So take the idea of the movie, write your own version of it, and it's probably going to be 100 times better than whatever this disastrous mess was. Real disappointing miss on every front. So no recommendation here. This is not good cheese. This is cheese you should have thrown away a month ago. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.